discussing how contractors can finish strong and finish well when they decide to exit their business. This is the Contractor Succession Podcast.
Okay, well, welcome to the Contractor Succession Podcast. My name is Marty Wolf, and with me today, as always, hopefully, is my partner in Contractor Succession and the co-host of the show, my good friend and my partner is Scott Good. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Marty. Great to be here again today.
Yes, it always is good to be with you on this podcast. And we have a guest whose name is Jay Steinfeld. Jay, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Marty. Thank you. Scott,
so Jay, you and I,
Likewise.
Jay, you and I talked. We talked on another show that we do called the Business Builders Show, and that was a big hit, by the way. A lot of people liked it and really found it fascinating, and so I got a lot of good feedback from it. During that show, as the title implies, we talked about how you built your company, Blinds.com, and you built it and you prepared it so well that it was became interesting to the Home Depot. And before I go any further, let me do a brief introduction for Jay. Jay Steinfeld founded and was the CEO of Blinds.com, the world's #1 online window covering retailer. Bootstrapped in 1996 for just $3,000 from his Bel Air, Texas garage, Blinds.com was acquired by the Home Depot in 2014. Hey, Jay, not bad. Garage in Bel Air, Texas to Home Depot buying you. Not bad, huh?
It's still hard to believe.
Yeah, I'm sure, and it's a few years later. So, as I set it up, the Business Builder Show, we talked about how you built that business. In this podcast, which is the Contractor Succession Podcast, we want to talk about, what were the parts of that, I guess. Maybe, what did you do to prepare that business to be sold? What was the process like during the transitional period? And I'd also like to talk about what you did after, what you and your company did after the deal was closed. So, Jay Steinfeld, let's start this way, maybe with this question. So, was there a trigger event or something happen that got you started thinking about selling the business? Did something special happen, or how did that occur?
I think when I first went into business, I had partners. I had already taken in some minority partners with a seed round, $500,000 to buy my first company for about a
Mm-hmm.
million point one. So as soon as you take on investors, you're already thinking about selling your company because
Mm-hmm.
you either are going to be giving them dividends in cash or you're going to sell it. And these were people who already had money and they didn't really need the cash. So they were thinking one day we would sell it. But I wasn't thinking about flipping this company because I didn't know anything about I didn't even know what the word flip meant at the time. All I knew was I had a company, I wanted to build it, and it was very young, and I knew virtually nothing about building a company or about being a CEO. It was 1996. Went full time online in 2001. That's when I took in that investment capital. And so from that point, I'm thinking, well, one day I'm going to sell the company. And that's what they were thinking. It got to the point, though, where some of the investors wanted 1/3 of the profits every month. I felt like the company could grow a lot bigger if we didn't take that money and give it out as a dividend. I wanted to put the money back into the company. I had aspirations to build a really bigger company over time, although at the beginning it was basically, how do I just stay in business? So once we were misaligned, I bought out those other two stockholders so I could put money back into the company and grow it. And it was 2 years after that, that was in 2012, that we did sell to Home Depot. So in the back of my mind, we were always thinking we were going to sell it. It wasn't until in 2012 when we took in that institutional capital from Morgan Stanley Growth Capital, that then we knew, okay, now in 3 to 5 years, or maybe longer, 7, we were definitely going to be positioning the company to sell.
Mm.
So it was more
Yeah,
determinant once we took in institutional capital, because that's all they do. They buy companies, they start companies, and they sell
yeah,
them.
yeah. So Scott, I saw you nodding. I saw you nodding your head. Some of you are seeing this on video. Some of you are listening on a podcast. But Scott, I saw you nodding your head. So any comments or thoughts on what Jay just said?
Well, I think one of the things that triggered my thinking here was Jay talking about having those partners, and I'm a sole proprietor myself. I mean, I'm an S corp, but I am the 100% owner of my business. Um, Outside of what Marty and I do together. And so I never think about that. I never think about, if I want money, I take money, but I don't have a partner that I have to share it with. And so thinking through that process, both during the start of your business, the running of it, and then the ultimate decision of how you're going to transition out, is that if you have partners, you probably ought to be having those conversations at some point. So you're all on the same page, knowing what direction you want to take the company. In your mind, you wanted to invest in it and grow it. They just wanted to take some cash out of it.
Well, I think if you don't have partners yet and you're thinking about it, those are questions you should have. I guess like when you're getting married, you should kind of ask questions. Do you want to have children? Where do you want to live? Those kinds of things.
Exactly.
Same kinds of questions that you should have, and maybe people do or maybe they don't. But for investment, you better be aligned or you're going to have a lot of discomfort.
Yeah, interesting. So you went through that, and here you are. And was the Home Depot your first real serious potential acquirer? Can you share that, or were they the main thrust of where you went? I mean, was there someone else before the Home Depot?
There actually was. There was a big public company. I don't say who they were, but people would know who they were, with a pretty famous CEO. And we actually agreed to sell to them. It was in writing, and we were 2 weeks away from selling. And this was probably at least 5 years earlier, maybe 7 years earlier. And it's a good
Mm.
thing we didn't sell to them because it didn't work out. We were 2 weeks away from closing, and somebody within the company who had just started there said, "We don't want to buy a blinds company. What is that?" And said, "No, we're not going to do that." Deal fell apart 2 weeks before closing. Thank God
Wow.
that happened, because what they were going to pay for us was nothing compared to what Home Depot paid. So in fact, there's so many things that have happened. I know this is not on topic, but it's so important. There's so many things that happen to you in business that you think you want, but it's so great that you didn't get them. And I bet you could put a list
Amen.
of all the things that you wanted, and you're so glad they never happened. So the next time something doesn't happen that you want it, just say, it's probably for the better. I don't believe in fate, but so many times you just go, boy, I'm glad that didn't happen. And that was one of them.
Well, maybe that's a good time. I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask more about the 4 principles. The book that we're taking a lot of this information from is Jay's book. I'm holding it up for those who can see. The title of the book is "Lead from the Core: 4 Principles for Profit and Prosperity." So what you just said may have something to do with the 4 principles, of which are: evolve continuously, experiment without fear of failure, express yourself, and enjoy the ride. So maybe evolve continuously is what you just shared with us, maybe, Jay, huh?
I think so. I had to reconcile a lot of things that didn't go right, or did go right and better than I expected. So yeah, evolving for sure, trying new things all the time, having a
Yeah.
voice and giving everybody a voice, and then having fun figuring it all out along the way. And especially when it works, that is obviously the most fun.
Yeah, I'm
It's
sure.
like today, being with you two. This is fun. This is enjoying the ride.
Yeah, this is great. So, okay, so you're in front of buyers, you're in front of Home Depot, you're in front of your investment bankers, all that other all that other stuff that's going on around a purchase like that.
Well, first, it wasn't like you think. It
Okay,
wasn't like
tell
that.
me,
No,
tell
we
me.
had no investment banker. We weren't looking to sell the company when we
Oh,
sold it.
okay, okay, good.
They
Tell me
came.
more.
Yeah, I think really the key thing is you're going to sell your business at a much higher price and faster when you don't want to sell it, when you don't need to sell it. When you have a
Hmm.
company that is growing really fast and spinning off a lot of cash and making a lot of money, then you're thinking, hey, this is great. I've got a business that I'm making a lot of money. I don't need to sell this. That's when you sell because people are going to have to wrestle that away from you because you love your business so much. And most people do. I mean, some people say, yeah, I hate my business. I wish I could get rid of it. But most people really do like it. And the more you like it, the more you don't need to sell it, the easier it is to sell it because people will say, how am I going to get that business from them without paying them a lot of money? Because he's making a lot of money or she's making a lot of money. And that's a great negotiation perspective to have going in because you can always say to yourself, if this doesn't go, this doesn't happen. And this is what I was telling myself the entire time when we were talking to Home Depot. If it doesn't happen, so what? I have a great business that's growing, and I think in 2 or 3 years it's going to be worth even more. So, okay, they don't buy, fine. They'll have to pay a lot more in 2 or 3 years, or Lowe's will be coming by, or whomever. So that's the key: is love your business and have it growing. Of course, it has to be growing so that people see your business as being profitable, that having cash. They want to see upside but they also want to see potential for even more upside so that when they take it, they've
Yeah,
got the potential of getting
yeah,
the big potential that you haven't seen yet. So they want that, but they also fear um, they have fear that things aren't exactly as rosy as they seem. So you've got to remove that fear too. And what we had audited financial statements 6 or 7 years before we were selling. Doesn't mean you
mm,
have to audit financial statements, but have good, solid, clear records. Know where all of your contracts are. Know exactly where everything is. So, because when they ask you a question, if you can go, oh, yeah, I've got that right over here. There it is. I need to know what your sales were 3 years ago. No problem. I can just go right over here. Here it is. Because that develops comfort that you've run a solid business with records that they can trust you, that you were in control of the business and that the business wasn't in control of you. So you're trying to show great growth, great opportunity, but also minimize the fear. And when you can minimize the fear, that's when you've got the best of both worlds. And I guess the other thing that you need to be careful about is, yeah, you love your business and you don't need to sell it, but the business shouldn't need you. Because if they feel like you are the one who is running the business, and if you aren't there, the business is going to fall apart, then I don't care what kind of earnout they put in there or what type of golden handcuffs they have, they're not going to buy it because they're still afraid you're going to leave or that you're not going to have your heart in it. So you've got to be able to show that the business is not dependent on you. That's a tricky dance. That was
mm,
something tricky I had to do with Home Depot because I really felt like I had gotten to the business to the point where I was not essential anymore. But I also wanted them to know that I wasn't going to leave because I had so much more I could do with Home Depot and that I didn't want to leave. So, how do you tell Home Depot the business doesn't need me, but I want to stay? Because they're going to go, wait a minute, which is it? Well, it was both. And I stayed 7 years after selling the company to Home Depot. How many people start a business from nothing, build it up, sell it, and then stay with a big monolithic company after 7 years? Well, I think those are the ways that you can position yourself and the company and make it appear, because it's true, that you don't need to sell it, but there's great opportunity and that there's minimal risk.
Hey, Marty, I think Jay could be a coach for contractor succession.
Yeah.
He pretty much stole everything we're trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what to say after that. We're done. We're kind of done here.
Well,
That was superb.
it's interesting because I think he's our mutual friend, John Warlow, has his built to sell, and Marty and I talk about that all the time with our clients. Is that you gave the perfect example. You weren't even looking, and they just showed up, but you were ready. You had your business in a position where it was valued, and where if you wanted to, you probably could have walked because you probably structured it properly. But building that business to sell, and that concept that John Morello talks about so often is something Marty and I preach all the time as well.
But I will say this: while I agree with you, and I do agree with John, I've been on his show twice.
Yeah.
We never built our company to sell. We built our company to thrive. By making our company thrive and be a solid company that was basically kicking Home Depot's butt and Amazon's butt and everyone in the world's butt, that made us positioned and built to sell if we wanted. But it wasn't this deliberate thing that we were doing, like, let's just orchestrate something and make it appear and window dress the company to make it look like somebody should buy us. No, that gets back to the thing I'd said earlier. Because if you're window dressing your company and you're doing things in the short term best interest, but in the long term worst interest, like cutting your advertising real quick so that your profits look big. No, you can't do that, because if you don't sell, you're screwed for a while and you're going to be making nothing. So we were building it, and we continued to invest in the company and did all the things that we needed to do to have a thriving, growing company that was growing at 20, 25%, that was making money, that was improving its gross margin, that had a high retention rate because people were engaged. And they knew that I loved the company. And I wanted to make sure that they knew that they're going to have to pay a lot to get that money from that company from me.
Wow, that was great. So you're probably saying it in so many words, but one of the questions I have written down was how important, if at all, was the culture that you built around these four principles? I mean, you built it and it was thriving in part because of the four principles, the way you led, the way the culture of the company. Was that important when the Home Depot looked at the company?
Absolutely, and it wasn't in part. I think we were successful precisely because of those four principles: evolve,
Okay.
experiment, express, and enjoy. That culture allowed us to build things that Home Depot was unable to do, that Amazon was unable to do. That
Yeah.
culture allowed us to attract the best people. It enabled us to attract entrepreneurial builders that wanted to build something of significance and were, in fact, significant in that process. When you make
Mm,
people feel consequential and significant, the result is they will do consequential and significant things. And that's what we were able to do. We built this technology. We built a contact center. We called it our customer engagement center, that really, truly, sincerely, earnestly cared about customer success. And we knew that if we were helping ourselves get better and helping everybody around us get better, our customer experience would get better. And that's pretty fun when you're doing consequential stuff. That's really what Enjoy the Ride is. It's about doing things that are really hard, that people tell you are impossible to do. And even if you get halfway there, it's still pretty fun. You've still enjoyed something that people said were impossible, like selling blinds online. That was supposedly a stupid idea. And maybe it was. Maybe at the time it really was, and we definitely beat the odds. But I
yeah.
think that's really important. Another thing that we did, though, when we talked about positioning, there were a few things that we did that were some tactics that I think would be helpful if you are selling. We wanted to make sure that people felt that comfort and confidence that we were growing and that we were safe. and that there were no skeletons in the closet. And we had a legitimate board. We had outside directors. It
Mm.
doesn't mean that if you're a small company that you must have a board with the proper governance and all that, but having an advisory board of people that are outside your company, that are providing some oversight, actually provided some comfort to Home Depot.
Mm.
So we had a board. We also had
Mhm.
those audited financial statements. We had hired Ernst & Young as our auditors instead of having the regional firm that we had. We used Silicon Valley Bank as our banker. So now you've got a company that is positioned to not only grow, but potentially even go public. Those are the types of things that you do when you're thinking about really getting big and going on the public market. And Home Depot believed that we were thinking seriously about going public. And it was definitely on the board list, and we were thinking about it. We didn't think we were ready yet, but we were positioning ourselves. And what Home Depot thought, not only do we have to make sure Lowe's doesn't buy them or Amazon, but we've got to make sure that they don't go public, and we've got to think about what might they pay, what might they get in the public market. So now they're having to do a little additional calculus, not just beating these other competitors, but what the valuation might be on a public market, and make sure that what they presented to us was appetizing enough that would prevent us from going public. So there were things that we were doing, but that's just running your company in a professional way. That's
Yeah.
just good governance anyway. So these are things that were not really window dressing, but they did look good. These are things that made us a better company.
Yeah. Fascinating. Let me ask you a question that's really on the ground that we hear all the time. And the question is, how and when and who do you communicate in the early stages that you're on this path? You know what I'm saying? Here you are. You got someone's approaches you. You've got this. You're feeling ready to go. Was your senior management team involved? At what point do you involve them? What do you say? You know what my question is. What's your thoughts
Well,
on that?
let me see if I can repeat it in a different way. Are you saying, when do you include your people in the discussion of whether you're going to sell the company or not? Because you need them to build the company. You're going to need
Yes.
them in the diligence process, but you don't want them to do what would be adversely affecting your ability to sell, because if you sell, they might lose their job. And will they benefit as well in the sale as you did? Is it along that line? Is that what you're thinking?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly it.
Okay. I included the senior people early and
Hmm.
let them know. And I mean, how can you tell somebody that you've taken money from Morgan Stanley, an institutional investor, and not let them know that one day you're going to sell? If you said you weren't selling, they'd look at you and go, "I've now completely lost trust in your ability to tell me the truth," because it's self-evident. And one of the things I did was I gave everybody in the company, stock options, so that if we ever did sell, they would benefit in some way. And there was a formula that we used for how much they would get. Nobody was going to get enough money to, quit and never work again, but it was a lot of money for most people. So we did that. From the senior people, we gave additional phantom income, phantom stock, which meant they would get basically big bonuses dependent on how much we sold the company for. And there's different ways to do that. So they knew that they were going to benefit. There were times when I was able to buy stock from some existing stockholders. And instead of just taking it myself, and I thought it was at a really reduced low price, I asked my senior members if they wanted to buy that stock at the same price that I bought it, and just gave it to them, because I wanted them to know that I wanted them to know that I knew I needed them, and I wanted them to benefit. One of the things that I've been preaching lately is about generosity. And it's not necessarily about giving more money or a higher salary. It's about giving more respect and more attention and just courtesy, just common decency. And when you listen to people and you see what they want, they just want to participate in the success too. and they want to feel that they were a part of it, and they want to get some reasonable compensation as a result of being part of the process. So those are the kinds of things that I would try to do, is to make them not just feel significant, but to actually be there with actual actions and tactics that I used where they would benefit. And afterwards I had the option of keeping. Home Depot asked me, we can give some additional money to them if you like, and we can pay it out over 2 years or 3 years. I told them I want it paid over 2 years, not 3, because I wanted them to get their money as fast as possible, because I really cared about them and I wasn't sure what I was getting us into. And therefore, I wanted them to get the money as soon as they could. And you know what? They all stayed 3 years or more, much longer.
Yeah.
And that
Wow.
just that I was thinking about them in the most, I think, maybe not the most generous way, but in a way that was respectful. And I think you include people that to let them know that they're going to benefit, and you must include them in the diligence process. You can't possibly do this yourself. And by the way, if you don't have a team, this gets back to one of my earlier points.
Yep, exactly.
I think it's all you, and they're going to be worried about what the business is going to look like once you sell it, because you're not there anymore. So
Yeah.
that's a real consideration, to include people.
Yeah. Scott, you've got to have a comment or thought or question on
Yeah,
that to follow
I,
up.
I I love Jay's focus on investing in people. I just I think that's such an important factor, and you show it just in your passion, the way you talk about it, and it ties a little bit into this enjoy the ride thing. And maybe you can help me a little bit. I think early on in when people start a business, they're focused, they're intense, they've got this drive, and it's all about, succeeding to the next level and to the next level. And a lot of people lose that love of the journey. And then your people start to see that intensity and that drive. And yes, you want people with intensity, and yes, you want folks with drive, but then trying to help them, and not just enjoy the journey, but celebrate some of the victories along the way. What are some things you've done with that besides just throwing checks around? I mean, how do you do that, or how did you do that at Blinds.com?
Well, how about just listening and asking questions and hearing what they say? Like a simple question such as, okay, Scott, let's not talk about your projects this week. Let's just talk about, what do you want with your career? What do you want with the trajectory of your life? Where are you going? How can I help you get there? Something like that. It's completely not what you would expect, but you want people to feel like you really care about their own journey. And when I started, I was a micromanager, like just the way you were describing. I was a horrible boss. And it wasn't until I realized that this evolve continuously is not just about myself getting better, but actually more about helping everybody around me get better. And that everybody around me's job was to get better and help everybody around them get better. Then we had this organization that had autonomous excellence. It was just happening. And it happened with minimal input from me. I was able to exert more control and influence over people by having less control and influence on people, because all I did was set up the environment that was right for people to want to become the best they could become. In fact, the purpose of our company was not to be something like the best in the world at selling blinds or something like that. Or it was more like the express purpose was to help people become better than what they ever believed possible. To help people become better. And that meant everybody around us.
Mm-hmm.
And when people really feel that and know that's what you need, and that you're not micromanaging them anymore, and that you understand that the only way we're going to get there is by this collaborative spirit of providing ideas and evolving and working solutions together. That's how we did it. That's how we beat everybody. And that's what Home Depot loved about us, that culture. They said, well, yeah, they've got the technology. I guess we have enough money. We could ultimately, in 10 years, build what they built in 2. We could, but it would spend a lot more money. But that culture is what we want. Because not only will we get the revenue and this technology and these people, but there are these people who can do things that we've never thought we could ever be able to do before. And that's why we all stayed, because we were better with Home Depot than we were by ourselves. We
Yeah.
became better than our prior selves. I always said it was, we felt like we were Tony Stark and they were Jarvis in the suit, and together we were Iron Man.
That's great.
My definition of success is not attaining anything. My definition of success is about being in the process of getting better, and helping everybody around me get better. If your definition of success is just the mere being in the process of getting better, then you can be successful every day. You can be successful multiple times during the day because you've helped somebody else get a little better. You've figured something else out. You found a weakness in yourself, which in itself is a type of positive energy, because now there's something else that you can get better at. And when everybody's thinking like that, it's easy to sell that kind of company, because everybody's having fun, everybody's smiling, and they know that you want what's in the best interest of everybody. And I did. And Home Depot knew what they were getting was high growth and low risk. So all that gave them everything they needed. And we negotiated very quickly, came to terms, and it was a great relationship. Frustrating many times, many days, most days.
I've heard it described as painful.
It's painful, but I was going to give an analogy, which I'm not going to do, because but it was. I think it's okay. It's not all roses. And it's growth. We were both growing together, and it was in the end, it really worked out beautifully. It was because it's about evolving. We all evolved. We all took some chances. We just lived our core values as being part of it.
Jay, let's get you out of here with this last question, because you did stay for several years after, and why did you want to do that, and what did you do, and maybe the team around you, you were there for like 7 years? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
After the deal. So talk to us about that.
Well, one of the big visions that we always had in the company was to not just be a blinds company, but to be the best in the world at selling complex, customizable, hard-to-buy products. Blinds are customizable, hard-to-buy products. Custom tables, custom chairs, custom decks, custom irrigation systems, sprinkler systems, things like that. We wanted to take the technology and what we had built, our platform, and apply it over multiple categories. We never did it by ourselves. But once we were with Home Depot, now we had merchants and we had customers and we had half a million employees and 2,000 stores and supply chain. We had all the things that we didn't have by ourselves. And that's why it was such a great deal. I stayed to make the reality of what our vision always was going to be a reality. And once it became a reality, that's when I left, because I had done basically everything I'd ever sought out to do. And I had my successor, and I already knew what my next gig was going to be. So, and I knew the core values were embedded into the company as well, which is another reason why I wrote Lead from the Core, because I wanted to make sure those 4 principles were in writing so that it wasn't just hearsay. The purpose of that book originally was just so that the people at blinds.com knew what got us there and what would always propel us into the future. And then once I started teaching, it became widespread and people wanted those messages. And expanded the scope of the book for other people as well. But that was the original genesis.
Yeah. So, Scott, you have a final question or comment?
Well, just two thoughts. I love the build to thrive. The build to sell is good. Build to thrive is even better, because that also helps you along the way, enjoying the journey. The other thing, going almost all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, and you had mentioned a deal that was close and fell apart. And love him or hate him, Donald Trump wrote in his Art of the Deal, never fall in love with a deal. And I've oftentimes used that conversation with my kids, talking to them about a job or buying a house or a car. Never fall in love with a deal. It's got to be right. And if it doesn't work, there was probably a reason for it not to work. So,
yeah.
There were companies we wanted to buy. We thought we were going to get them, and then, no, why not? Why didn't we get that? I thought we were going to get that. No, we didn't. Probably a good thing that didn't happen too, because soon after that deal didn't go through, Home Depot came around. Lowe's had also come around. I think Lowe's came first, and I think Home Depot heard that Lowe's was snooping around, and that propelled them to maybe come a little quicker.
Nothing like a little competitive action to help move
And
things
Lowe's
along.
and Home Depot, they're not competitive at all.
no,
I guess not.
directly across the street from
seeing
each
that
other.
from the inside, amazing.
I can imagine. I can imagine. Well, Jay,
It's Coke versus Pepsi for sure.
yeah, Jay, we could talk for hours. We're probably going to ask you back, so hopefully you'll accept, because there's so much more I want to talk to you about. But let's wrap this up. And again, we have been speaking with Jay Steinfeld. His book is Lead from the Core: The 4 Principles for Profit and Prosperity. You can learn more about him at jsteinfeld.com. jsteinfeld.com. I suggest you do that. I suggest that if you are running a company of any size, as Scott knows, that what we do is we have our reading clubs, and we have management read certain books and things like that. Scott, I think you'll agree that this would be a great one for a lot of our clients to be reading. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was great. It's a great book. So, Jay, thanks so much for the wisdom. Thanks so much for everything you're doing. Thanks so much for being part of the Contractor Succession Podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Contractor Succession Podcast. You can learn more about us at our website, contractorsuccession.com. You can also find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter.